So welcome everyone. This is Sarvodaya's second talk, and we have none other than Sarvodaya Prasadji, and he was really responsible for helping us get this group started. Oh, it's our food guy. Can one of you just take this call, and we need directions. So I want to give a very brief introduction about Prasadji, and then I will pass the mic to him. So he contacted me, I think it was 2 years back, and the MLK Institute told him about me, and we had organized, a bunch of people who had organized Gandhi Jayanti. And so I met him and I thought, okay, so many people visit Stanford, he's also one of our many visitors. But he kept coming back, and I met him again, and we kept talking about Gandhi's vision and how he wanted to connect all the academic institutions around India and in the US on the common theme of Gandhi and ideology. And I thought that was pretty fascinating that we really needed something like this on campus. But I wanted to see what he was doing in India, so he invited me to visit with him, and I went with my wife last summer, and we spent 5 days, I think. So those are the most remarkable days of my last summer. I mean, apart from getting married. So we spent 3 days in Hyderabad, and what I saw was nothing short of a renaissance of Gandhian thought. In fact, it seems like there's a whole revolution happening, and it's happening in Andhra Pradesh. I don't know why in Andhra Pradesh, maybe because he's there, but he's the general secretary of the Sarvodaya organization there, and we traveled pretty interior, like into villages, into talks at prisons and MBA schools. And everyone, I was surprised to see everyone wanted to hear about Gandhi and to get involved in some way. And we even got interviewed by journalists, and they were very frustrated that with whatever was happening in society. So everyone wanted to, wanted some change, and especially in the direction of Gandhian thought. And so we came and we started the Sarvodaya organization on campus. And the aim is to practice some of the things that Gandhi talked about. In particular, we want to focus on very small things, small acts of kindness. And hopefully, by the end of the talk today, you'll all get to participate in small acts of kindness. One of the things we do is when we have leftover food, we serve it with our own hands to all the hungry people who are studying around here. So I think we will have some leftover food today, so that's a great opportunity for all of us. But with that, I will pass it now to Prasadji. And just so you know, he's here for a month, so if you guys want to hang out with him or connect with him and give him your ideas, he will take your idea and actually implement it when he goes back. So this is a great opportunity, and I pass it to Prasadji.
We will use it later.
Okay.
And if possible, I would like to avoid that. So, good evening, all of you. It's my great pleasure to be here. The reason is something that Soumik has told. I had been coming and meeting him for this is my 3rd visit to Stanford, meeting him. But I had a couple of visits earlier to that, and I was told that he organizes Gandhi Jayanti here on this campus. That's how I was interested in meeting, talking to him. And then I said, whenever you come to India, you must visit. Let us plan a meeting there also. So he came and we visited some places in Andhra Pradesh. It was too packed kind of a visit it was. 5 days was definitely not enough. It must have been at least a week or even 10 days. But you know, even to take out 5 days was something substantial. But then I wish all of you visit India like Soumikji has done it. And the outcome is, after coming back, he said I would start Sarvodaya in the Stanford campus. So what more can give me greater happiness than this, and also meeting all of you. Now I would like to make it an open kind of thing. Like for example, whatever ideas that you would like to raise, based on that I would like to continue my discussion. I will use the presentation only to extent I use some quotations from Gandhi here and there. Otherwise, really speaking, I don't want to use it. Now, as far as India is concerned, it is now advancing, most happening country. The world is looking towards India. This is what we normally hear. So technologically we are advancing, especially the IT sector. And when we look to Hyderabad city, where I come from, we find Hyderabad is the most happening city, they call it. All these things I do agree. But our concern is also with the rural areas. The vast majority of the people in India live in villages. So what is happening in the villages? What is happening to our society? What kind of attitudes are ruling the society? This is something that I am a bit concerned. And I would very humbly submit that whatever I am talking to you, it is from a limited perspective I have. Whatever I see, I say this is the reality. But the reality may be something else. So I do agree with that kind of situation, but I would like to say this is the reality, this is the thinking, this is a thought process as is occurring to me. I don't have the audacity to say that this is the truth and this must be the truth for everybody. So having said that, I was also attracted more towards Gandhi. Way back in 1972, I came into contact with the Gandhian community, Gandhian ideas, Gandhian thinking, and I was also part of All India Tarun Shanti Sena. That is the youth wing of the Gandhian movement. Participated in their camps actively. So I had that kind of a background, and presently I am the General Secretary for Andhra Pradesh Sarvodaya Mandal, which is part of the National Sarvodaya Mandal, or it is known as Sarva Seva Sangh. When Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated in 1948, 30th January, what happened is thereafter all the Gandhian organizations, thinkers, they all came together and said something should be done to continue the legacy. So they formed this organization, All India Sarva Seva Sangh, which is also known as All India Sarvodaya Mandal. And every state has got a state wing. I work with the state organization, and the activities are basically to spread the message of Gandhi. And also not merely, when I say Gandhi, there is always a confusion. When I use the word Gandhi, let me define what I mean by the word Gandhi. It is of course Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the father of the nation, who fought for the freedom. All that is one work. He also was the person who fought against British in South Africa for the rights of the Indian minority there. So in addition to that, when I say the word Gandhi, for me I remember Vinoba Bhave, the land gift movement or the Bhudan movement. He walked 12,000 miles in India begging for land gift, collected 43 lakh or 4.3 million acres of land. That's what he collected and distributed to people. One is, if you don't give land, I will fight with you or I will kill you. That was the violent movements that went on in the country. So he was thinking, what can be the alternative? The alternative is change of heart. Can love play a role? Can love become a solution for the social problems. That's Vinoba Bhave. Then came Loknayak Jayaprakash Narayan, who fought against the corruption in the society, nepotism in society, all the kind of very wrong trends that were taking place. He talked about total revolution, the entire youth were backing him. Then we had Dr. J.C. Kumarappa, the Gandhian economist, who worked on rural industries, rural employment. He talked about economy of permanence. We don't want that for our own greed, we exploit this nature, destroy the nature, leaving nothing for the posterity to come. So instead of that, he talked about that. So I remember all these people. In addition to that, internationally, if you look at in America, we had Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. who fought for civil rights successfully, Nelson Mandela or Leo Alisha. You can think of about 20-25 people all around the world who worked and fought for the humanity's cause. So I think of all these people and the great work done by all these people when I talk or when I use the word Gandhi. Similarly, these are the good ideas that he inherited, not from a single religion, but there had been a lot of influence on him of the Christianity, of Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and all the scriptures that were used by him. Then the work of Jesus Christ, Mahavira, the Buddha. So it is those great people who contributed to a peaceful, non-violent world, just world, peaceful world. So for me, when I use the word Gandhi, all this put together, I am using in the word Gandhi, not merely one human being who lived. Having said that, the question I should place before you is that what is the essence of Gandhi? What is it that I understand? Everybody understands the same thing from different perspectives. But let me first of all place before you that perspective and then go to the relevant aspects. He talked about Sarvodaya because your group name is Sarvodaya. What is the meaning of Sarvodaya? It means welfare of all. Sarva means all, Udaya means enlightenment, welfare. So welfare of all. So you and I, we are all in the same wavelength, with the same ideals, that we want the welfare of all. All means all human beings. When we say all human beings welfare we want, it means all human beings are equal? Or is it possible that some human beings are great, some are inferior, some are superior and some are not? It can't be that. Irrespective of caste, creed, religion, language, region, color of the skin, whatever it is, all human beings are the same. So do we accept that as a fundamental proposition? This is a question. In fact, most of the wars were fought on religion, or even a lot of tensions, caste tensions exist in India. So when we talk about Sarvodaya, welfare of all, the first premise is all human beings are equal and we are working for the welfare of all human beings. Then it is not only the human beings but also the welfare of sub-human world. That's where the welfare of animals, welfare of birds, welfare of plants, welfare of environment, even the rocks, the lakes, the rivers, the oceans. So we stand for welfare of the entire, not only humanity, but also the subhuman world, the environment, etc. So we are very familiar with the concept of Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu. But here, all life, unity of life, the entire life is one. So it is that concept which is at the foundation. So having said this, if we believe in the concept of welfare of all, equality of all, respect for all, how should I behave? How should I conduct myself with others? How should I live in this world? What should be the pattern? And it is here Gandhi used the expression Swaraj. Normally we hear Swaraj or sometimes freedom, the independence, as the equivalent terms. But Gandhi used this word Swaraj in a different context. Swaraj means Swaraj, self-rule. I should rule myself. I should know how to rule myself. So self-rule or self-control. Because the mind gets a lot of ideas. I have so many passions. Passions of hatred, passions of violence, passions of greed, passions of exploiting others. So a lot of passions we get. So do I know how to control my passions? Do I know how to control my mind? So that's what he called Swaraj. And for that, how do we build an individual? How should I live in this society? How should be my attitudes? What should be my values? He suggested Ekadasha Vrat. Not that he invented them on his own, he essentially borrowed from the religions. In fact, Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, they contained the 5 principles. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Asangra. These 5 are common in these religions. And for these 5, he added 6 more. He talked about Sharira Shrama, then control of palate. That is, if you want to have control of mind, unless you control the tongue, you can't control the mind. So therefore he talked about it. Then he talked about Swadeshi, he talked about equality of religions, equality of human beings, that is Parsha Bhava. So these additional principles he added, and the 11th principle we call it Ekadasha Vrata. He has given as to how a person should live. Then after that, how should the society be constructed? That's where he gave the 18-point constructive program. That is again removal of untouchability, communal harmony, then economic equality, village sanitation, basic education, promotion of mother tongue, kisans, organic farming, students, helping the lepers. So all these kind of things he put, and how the society should be constructed. That is the second aspect. Individual, then how should the society be constructed? And whenever there is injustice in the society, how do you face injustice? How do you fight injustice? That's where he offered Satyagraha. So constructive program for the society, Ekadasha Vrat for the individuals, and Satyagraha for the fighting the injustice. And in fighting the injustice, because there is a person who is perpetrating injustice, and he normally has violence along with him. We find this kind of mafia, we find gundas, this kind of violent elements, they just kill wherever there is injustice. But you are on the side of justice. When you are on the side of justice, why do you need to resort to violence at all? This was the question. Justice is on your side. So face that injustice, face that brute force using your truth force, using your soul force, using your moral force, and self-suffering to bring in change in the attitude of the opponent. That's what Satyagraha is. Maybe it looks a little abstract, but I can just give you some examples that have taken place in my own life. Way back in 1972, I was attending a camp, so Tarun Shan Sena camp, which I was mentioning to you. And in that camp, we were supposed to wash the plates after we dined. It was about 140 people from all over the country. It was in a mango garden that was organized. So at the place where we were to wash the plates, there was a poster displayed with which depicted a water tap, lot of plates left around there with lot of leftover food. We normally waste lot of food. The caption was, "This could have been someone else's food. Had you not wasted this food, someone else could have eaten this food." And India is a poor country. India is a country where there is poverty. India is a country where there is hunger. And have you heard about starvation deaths in India? The district where we had been operating, one of the districts, Mahabubnagar, had a lot of starvation deaths. people die for want of food. No exaggeration involved. So a country where starvation deaths occur, malnutrition exists, I think it is criminal to waste food. So the organizer said, please eat as much of food as you like. This is a camp we are organizing not with any government money. We are organizing by raising donations. Somebody gave dal, somebody gave wheat, somebody gave oil, things like that we collected and organizing this camp. Please don't waste any food. What do you think will be the response? No response. We just listen. I said, should I listen to you? Should I obey you? I am talking from the Indian context. So they heard, but I think things have not changed. Still people are wasting food. So once the organizers talked about it, they're all young people. Somebody is a gold medalist in medicine, somebody gold medalist in agriculture, and they left their careers in those days. Said, we want to work for the country. We want to make a better India. That was the kind of commitment. So though they were asking, they were appealing, the response was not so much. So they gave a warning, they gave a threat. What is a threat? What can be the threat? If I see wasting of food in anybody's plates, in the dinner we will not give you food. I think that can be a usual threat, isn't it? But mind you, that was not the threat they have given. What did they say? They said, I think we failed to convince you with our argument. So the only way left out for us is, we will eat that juta khana, whatever is left over, we never touch the leftover foods. Never. In fact, it is also a taboo, like, always. Even relatives normally they do not eat. So they were standing at the gate, and as each person was passing by, whatever food was left over in the plates, they collected into their plates and they eat, about 5 or 6 of them. What happened in 1972 is in front of my eyes, so clear even today. And by evening, mind you, by evening, at the time of dinner, there was not a smallest particle in the plates of anybody. And after the dinner, when we all had a congregation like, and all were hanging their heads in shame. Nobody was able to raise their heads to look directly into the eyes of the organizers. I said, what happened? When the people here in the camp, the participants committed a mistake, I would call it a mistake. Something wrong. Instead of punishing those who are committing this mistake, who are erring, the organizers punished themselves. And the effect was thrilling, so magnificent. The message has gone so deep, so directly into the minds of the people. That's what Satyagraha is. But it is not the kind of street pandal and they have a garland and say that we are offering a Satyagraha. That is not the kind of, in fact, it is more a mockery of the Satyagraha. Having said this, I would like to quickly get into something else. I was talking about the attitudinal part of it. What is happening in the villages? Or what is happening in the Indian society? In fact, I was talking to Shashank a little while ago. A little earlier I was talking to others also. So he was talking about what are the problems pertaining to the technology related kind of things. A lot of issues, somebody would talk about the health issues in the villages, somebody would talk about what about education, should we not strengthen the education so that India will become developed, all these kind of things will come. But to my mind, in fact what I want you all to do is after you listen to me, I would like you to even dismantle whatever I am talking. Sometimes I am so much enamored with what I am talking, I wish what I am talking is wrong, and I want somebody like you should very strongly tell me that this is not correct. What I am saying is the attitudinally people, I think they are becoming selfish. In India, maybe it is a phenomenon elsewhere too, but in India, in general, people are becoming selfish, or they are becoming selfishness. I don't think there is anything wrong in it, because I am hungry now, I want to eat food. That is also selfishness, but that is a limited selfishness, and there is something called unlimited selfishness. The other day I was talking to a guy there and I asked, what do you want to become? He's already owning a company, an IT company. He says, I want to become richer than Bill Gates. He could have said, I want to become very rich. I would have been satisfied. That was not the answer. He says, I want to be the richest man in the whole world as an objective. So I would say, or I would feel that people started becoming very selfish or very greedy, and there is a desire for unlimited accumulation. Desire for unlimited accumulation. I normally tell people, do what you like. Because I am not a guru. I am not here to tell you, do this or don't do that. That's not for me. But I am trying to analyze and understand. So here in this situation, people had a desire for a lot of wealth. Basically, I don't find fault with it. But my next question was as to how do you do that? Is it from your own efforts that you would like to enrich yourself, or do you grab it from somebody else? To my mind, there are the two models. Either you must generate wealth or produce wealth, or somebody has produced wealth, you will grab it. Which one do you prefer? I ask. Normally they say we don't want anything from somebody else. We are satisfied with whatever is. I said, be careful. Be sure that you are answering the right way. Are you sure that you don't want anything which is not yours? In fact, I can ask this question to you also. Do you say that we want to have something which is ours and we don't want anything which is not ours? Where do we stand? Is the question clear?
But how do you know what's mine and what's
That
mine?
we'll see later. There are two things, mine, not mine. I want what is mine. I do not want what is not mine. Simple statements. Are they simple? Or confusing or complicated?
Simple.
Simple. As simple as the color of milk is white. Is that as simple? So something is mine, this chair is not mine. So should I take it home? I should not, as simple as that. So this was the question. What is not mine, I don't want. Or I want to get something, or I aspire for something which is not mine. When this issue has come, everybody says, I don't want. But then I ask them a question. You are going on the road. There is a 500 rupee note lying there. Nobody around you. What do you do? The answer was mostly, what is the answer?
I'll pick it up.
Pick it up, use it, enjoy it. Or some people say, I will give to the police. Somebody said, I will put it in the in hundi. In the temple hundi, I will put it. Everybody said invariably that in fact I too will take it and I perhaps use it for myself or for my work anyway. But then the point is, having touched it, you claimed ownership. That's what I said. You are trying to aspire to get something which is not yours. Or for example, the lottery that is so popular even in the United States. So many people buy. I want to buy for $1 and I want to get $1 million. So million people put their monies, and when I buy this ticket, I expect that I will be getting, or I wish to get that money, which means I want all your money to come into my pocket. So I'm aspiring for something which is not mine. This is what I want to essentially say. But whereas in the past, our society was not on this model. There was something like, I am contented with what is mine or whatever I have. That's enough. I don't want something beyond this. But then the question is, how do I do that? Once I accepted that I will get something, I want something which is not mine, what are the mechanisms? The first thing is theft. Why do you have theft in society? Because I am willing to take something which is not mine. Then dacoity, robbery, cheating, corruption, whatever maladies we have in the society, they are all because of this particular thing. Imperialism also a result of that. If you say that I should not go to India, I should not occupy India, I should not enslave India, why will that happen? The fight against British, why should that exist? So imperialism, why did slavery exist? Why did segregation exist? How about feudalism, bonded labor? So whatever phenomena we had been seeing in this world, it is all because of that single tendency. But now what happened is, perhaps the systems or structures or methods have changed, but the intention to exploit still continued. So when I am looking at the villages, I am always observing what is coming into the village and what is going out of the village. What is coming into the village. Usually you may be knowing that liquor is coming into the village. Liquor, Sara we call it, Sara, Arak, whatever name you call it, or Toddy you can call it. So it is coming and people sell it in the village. Then tobacco is coming into the village, people smoke bidi, cigarettes, etc. Then soft drinks have come into the village. I am talking from the Indian context, kindly understand that. And my question would be whether these are all the things which I really require for my survival or for my needs in the village. As a person working in the villages, looking at the problems of the villages, I am just placing it before you. Maybe it will be difficult to understand, accept, whatever it is. But what I am saying is, soft drinks are going into the village, confectionery is going into the village, cosmetics are going into the village, plastics have gone into the village, and in exchange we are losing all our milk. And the first thing to go to the village is a milk van. Go to any village. I think you must be going in India to some village. Just if you observe, you need not even talk to anybody. The first thing to go out of the village is the milk van. The entire milk goes out. Vegetables go out from the village. Fruits go out of the village. Flowers go out of the village. Water goes out of the village. Grain goes out of the village. Cotton, whatever it is, all the natural wealth goes out of the village. But then this exchange mechanism which is taking place, I would like to request you to look at the value attribution, how the value is attributed. If you want to just drink a liter of water, it costs you 12 rupees and the farmer is getting 8 rupees per liter of cow milk that he produces. But what you have seen in the Wardha is a different model altogether. It's a very unusual what Gandhian groups have taken it. Otherwise, it is just 8 rupees, 9 rupees per liter. So what happened in the process, I once calculated a village of about 2000 population is losing annually 1 crore rupees with all the items that I had been narrating to you. And if I take a district, maybe you have about 2500 villages of that size, of average size. So I would argue 2500 crores of rupees wealth siphoned out from each district annually. This is the problem that I am getting. Now, if you see how much of money comes to the district from the government programs, maybe about 300, 400 or 500 crores. So 500 crores coming, 2500 crores going out annually. Show me how can you balance this balance sheet. Or if you want to make a profit and loss account, how can a village ever, or how can a district ever become resourceful enough? This is one question I would like you to probe. So all these things, the earlier 4 items that I was mentioning, whether it is the cheating, robbery, corruption, etc., theft, etc. The second one is imperialism, feudalism, slavery. In all these 4 models, there was an oppression or just an exploitation was done. In the last model that I am talking about, through a market mechanism, it is the willing cooperation of the exploiter. Because you go and buy it. You go and buy a cigarette or you go and buy a cosmetic. In fact, you find most of the people in the village are using the toothpaste. I don't use a toothpaste. I use some other powder which is produced in the village, which I find extremely useful. Or for that matter, the soap I use again is made from the villages, which is extremely qualitative, I would say. So when we can produce whatever my requirements are there in the village itself, why do we go for that? So it is the influencing of the mind, because each day you are accosted with about 3000 advertisements. And it is very seldom possible to get away from that kind of advertisements. So it is here we talk about, in the Gandhian circles, on the practical side, we talk what you call the Gram Swaraj model. Gram Swaraj means self-reliant villages. What are the various aspects in the villages? The first thing that I would like to talk about is the agriculture. Agriculture is a primary activity. But do you know what is happening to Indian agriculture? We have officially stated statistics by the Agriculture Minister of Government of India that 1,12,000 farmers committed suicide. Is it a phenomenon that we are willing to accept? Why is it happening? Why is it happening? Why farmer who was feeding others had to commit suicide? What was the kind of farmer? If I look at the farmer in the olden days, he used to say Gomata, mother cow. He was having a lot of reverence for the cow. He used to call Bhumata. He treated earth as a mother, that kind of a concept. Atithi Devo Bhava, whoever comes to his house, he fed them. And there had been a community kind of feeling in the village, that kind of togetherness. And that agriculture, which he practiced, I would call it a non-violent agriculture. Why the farmer is committing suicide? One reason is that our agriculture, which was non-violent agriculture, has now become a violent agriculture. One point. Why? The farmer used the concept of mother earth, mother cow. There was a reverence for earth, animals. Agriculture was based on animals. It was a cow-based agriculture. It was an agriculture where trees played a very, very important role, because the trees were mostly supplying the nitrogen required, nitrogen fixing trees, I would call it. Then the farmer knew how to handle water. Watershed development we are talking these days, but farmers knew how to hold water. One is growing the trees so that you get more rain, and with the root structures of the trees, grass, the soil erosion was arrested. Then the farmer used his own seeds, means from the crop, whatever well-grown plants, from those plants he collected the seeds, used it for the next crop. He was never dependent on the market. So it's local seeds. Then what about the manure? He was depending on the cows or the bovine population. From the cow dung he converted that into manure, golden manure. Whereas I can't understand how a non-living thing like a chemical manure, chemical fertilizers support a living thing like crops. A crop is a life process. You put a seed, it germinates. What is this process? It's a life process. So how can you bring in a life process something called death? How do you use insecticides and pesticides? If your crop is strong, if you are using manures, usually the pest attack will be very minimal. Even if there is an attack, even if the pest eats away some 10%, doesn't matter, live and let live. So our agriculture was based on the principle of live and let live. But now live and let die. How? The seeds we used, there was a combination of the interest of the farmer or the human being and also the animal. You remember the sorghum plant, if you remember, it grows very tall, almost 7 feet, 8 feet tall. You get small amount of grain out of that, and the stem goes as a fodder for the animals. But today I have become so greedy, and my scientific technological know-how has gone so ahead that I am able to find a dwarf variety of sorghum. And when I go for a dwarf variety of sorghum, I get more grain, agreed. But what about the fodder? So the fodder is missing. So the animals are sent to slaughterhouse. If you go and observe in any village, the cattle population is reducing so much. And you might have heard about a variety of rice, it is known as Hamsa variety of rice. These are all things which I never knew before. Hamsa variety of rice, you get more yield as far as rice is concerned, but the hay, the rice hay, husk, it is not eaten by the animals. They won't eat. I did not know this. I knew that animals won't eat, but why I did not know. Some scientists later told me that there is what is it, thorns inside the stem. So I felt as if it was a deliberate strategy to go for a variety whereby animals do not get fodder, therefore animals are compelled to be sent to slaughterhouse, and you further lose the golden manure that you can get. So there is a demand, increasing demand for the fertilizers to be used, which are again fossil fuel based. And I know there was a report in the local newspapers in Andhra Pradesh that a fertilizer company claimed 300% subsidy, because if you see the subsidy pattern, 4,000 crores of rupees per annum is the subsidy given on the chemical fertilizers, and the subsidy is not given to the farmers directly. It is given to the companies which are producing the fertilizers. So I would ask a question: if you are really interested in increasing the production, you can straight away give, based on for every bag of rice, we give you so much of subsidy. It is not done like that. It is done to the fertilizer company, and for them it is just they can bribe somebody and claim something more, and this is kind of what is happening. So first point that I am trying to say here is, we lost our seeds. Today the seeds are to be imported or they have to be taken from the market. They say that the yield is higher, but the fact is that I can't use the seeds produced in the crop for my next crop. I can't use it. So my dependency will be permanent on the market. So self-reliant agriculture has become dependent agriculture. Non-violent agriculture became violent agriculture. Non-monetary agriculture became a monetized agriculture. Because the seeds I produced, manures I produced, I handled my own this thing, and you know how the crop was protected? Crop protection also was indigenous. They used neem. Do you know how effective cow urine is as a crop protecting device? You just collect a drum or a tub full of cow urine and put neem leaf and allow it to digest for about 15 days, and you take the extract and spray on the crop. We have done it. In fact, we have got this kind of models. So you can protect the crop without spending any money. Manure can be without any money. Seeds without any money. Irrigation can be without any money. That's why I said I use the expression cow-based agriculture. So cow means the bull also. When the bulls are plowing the lands, for every 2-3 rows they will stop. Have you observed that? What they do, they stand and they urinate. That urination is most essential for the soils. In fact, we have also got some reports. In fact, there is a 3-volume report, Cattle Commission of India. It's a very scientific report. I am not talking anything. In fact, the cow dung can. One aspect I am talking about is that agriculture, self-reliant agriculture. This is one model. In fact, when I talk about cow urine, as I said, very good pest repellent. It is not a pesticide. Why do you want to kill a pest? It is enough if you repel the pest. So it is possible. Then cow urine is also used in a number of medicinal preparations, especially the Ayurvedic and all that. In fact, you may be knowing some people drink a little quantity of cow urine every day. In fact, once it so happened, a friend of mine who is a very senior IAS officer came to my villages, and we were just walking around in the morning, and suddenly he found a local cow, that white Deshi guy, not the Jersey cow. Deshi guy was urinating, and he immediately drank a bit of that. And in the same speed, before I could realize anything, he put it into my mouth also. So that went down my line. And then the feeling I got was as if some medicine has gone inside. Never any other kind of feeling. In fact, even the soap that I am using, it is made from cow dung. Cow dung based soap I use. I bring it here. And that soap is also having multani ki mitti, which is used for face packs, neem oil, turmeric and tulsi. With these things they make it. In fact, when Shashank was asking what kind of research can we do, in fact I was saying, can you do some research on this cow dung based soap or this kind of tooth powders, that's also produced like that. But it is very, very effective. My wife is a dental surgeon, and of course she is an MDS, and they're into the modern medical world. So she tested this tooth powder on about 1,000 patients and found that it has made miracles, like in terms of oral hygiene, solving several problems. And this is what is available, and we want the authenticity, like we have done this with Indian Institute of Chemical Technology in Hyderabad. But more than that, when you ask a question, what kind of research is possible, I would request the involvement of people like you to study this kind of thing. Then the other aspect I would like to come. One is I talk about self-reliance in agriculture. I just gave you some examples. Then going to the cloth. This is the cloth I am wearing is khadi. This is known as khadi. That is made from cotton, hand spun, hand woven cloth it is. I think you had some towels and all that. So a village if you take, each person requires how much of cloth per annum? Again, not from American standards. I would still speak from the village standards. So 2 pairs of clothes, 1 lungi, 1 bed sheet, 1 towel. If I take it minimum, at least 20 meters of cloth. And 2,000 population of village, 40,000 meters of cloth is a requirement, and this is what was produced once upon a time in the village. Now I ask a question, what happened to that work today? Who has snatched away this work? By whatever argument you give, it won't satisfy me. Is it possible to revive the work available in the villages? If somebody is producing, that is production by masses, that's what Gandhi talked about, where you involve every human being, involve the hands. Now what happened is the entire work is snatched away. Like I said, the water has gone away, flowers have gone away, fruits have gone away, vegetables have gone away, milk have gone away. My work also has gone away. Now what is the development model? So it is a decentralized, localized situation. Again, when I say this is not for each village, I am not saying that. What I am saying is a bioregion. Can it be a block? Can we think in terms of a block? Can we plan for development of a block so that we want to, whatever we have the resources we want to produce and consume within this area, whatever excess is there we want to send it outside. Then I come to the biogas program, that is energy requirement. We need a lot of energy for cooking, for lighting, agricultural operations. Is it that we don't have the necessary wherewithal for meeting the energy requirements in the villages? Absolutely no. We do have enormous resources to meet energy needs in the village. If you have you seen a biogas plant? Some of you must have seen a biogas plant. That what Joe was talking in the last time he was giving a speech here. And in a biogas plant, it is like a digester. How much size? Let us say the sofa set size, or slightly less than that. We call it a 2 cubic meter size plant for a family of 6 to 8 people. And how much dung do you require? You require about 50 kilograms of dung to run the plant. Okay? So 50 kilograms of dung come from 5 animals. The usually well-grown cow or buffalo or bull gives you 10 kilograms of dung per day. So 5 animals, usually many families do have that kind of population of the animals. So feed that with equal water, 50-50. And it is a biochemical process, generates methane gas, which is combustible, and it has got, I think compared to the LPG gas we use in India, it is very little lesser than that as far as calorific value is concerned. How does it make a difference if I am using LPG? It takes half an hour to cook. This may take 35 minutes to cook, but still it makes more sense. And this doesn't make the vessels dark. You know, in India, rural cooking is done more on smoke than on fire. And it is said that the Indian woman inhales smoke while cooking, which is equivalent to smoking 20 packets of cigarettes per day. If somebody is smoking 2 packets, they will say, "Sir, Baba, you'll get cancer, you'll get this, that, be careful." But what about these 20 packets of cigarette equivalent smoked by the Indian women? So how do we save them from that? All the respiratory problems, all the eye cataract kind of problems that women have, they're all emanating from this. So what is the solution? One is, of course, we had been doing the smokeless chullas, where there is a draught system that smoke goes out. That is one method where there is no possibility for a biogas plant, but when there is a possibility of biogas plants, go for a biogas plant, use these 5 animals, and it's a very clean fuel, yes.
But after that,
What after that?
means the energy is used as what for cooking? You have to provide
Then a biogas plant, it is like there is an inlet and an outlet. You feed it from one end, it comes out from the other end. And what we construct is known as 45 days retention time biogas plants. That means what you feed today will come out after 45 days. So 45 days will be the period required for digestion of this biomaterial. And whatever comes out, it has got 2% more nitrogen than the normal compost manure. So actually biogas is a program which is one shot, two birds you say, but this is one shot, three birds. How? One is it solves the fuel problem in the village kitchen. The second thing is it is using the dung and produces extremely good manure, extremely good manure. If you like, you can add it with vermicompost, earthworms. Earthworms, they thrive on biogas slurry. So the earthworm manure that is known as vermicompost is extremely rich. It has the requisite enzymes, hormones required for plant growth. So that is the second dimension. The third dimension that I am talking about is when the slurry comes out of the biogas plant, no fly or mosquito will sit on that. That is a test for us. Whether it is properly digested or not. How do we test it? If flies are coming and sitting, that means it is not properly digested. Normally, if you have a cow dung strewn here and there, it is filth. So it attracts mosquitoes and flies. But when you put it through the digester, it is known as anaerobic digestion. When it goes through the process, when it is properly digested, that's why you should feed the same quantity every day. It is not that can we eat 10 chapatis one day and only half chapati another day. Not possible. As we maintain that, that is how the energy levels will be maintained. Same is the case with biogas plant. So biogas, solar, wind, animal energy, these are all the various alternate sources of energy which are very effective, and maybe some research is possible how to enhance maybe the product. For example, biogas, instead of using 5 animals, can we produce the same amount of gas using 3 animals dung? That's the kind of research we require. We are using a plant called Deena Bandhu model biogas plant. That's a plant that are made popular by all of us. Is there any other structural design that we can do which can make it still smaller, but still it can be made use of? Another question in biogas. Third question perhaps is in biogas, whatever is generated now should be used immediately. You are connecting it to the kitchen and you must use it. You can't store it. One problem. Because biogas is something which can't be compressed. Like this liquid nitrogen, LPG gas, you can't, liquid petroleum gas, you can't compress it. You can't fill it in a cylinder. So you can't carry it somewhere. So physical distance and time distance, not possible as of today. But there are some researches, some breakthroughs are coming nowadays. So this is another area where we talk about biogas. Then coming to the health area, can we have people's health in people's hands? Or people's health, you want to keep it in the hands of the doctors and pharmaceutical companies? Let us look at it. My brother-in-law, can I tell some stories about myself? My own brother-in-law, my sister's husband. Once when I went to them, they said, "Hi brother-in-law, how are you?" Then he showed me a product. He's working in a pharmaceutical company. He showed me a product, a new product with a nice glass, and there is some straw-like too, very beautifully made. And it is granules, health drink. You mix in milk and drink. I think in US you get a lot of such things. So he showed me that. Then he asked me, "Do you know what is the price of this?" I said, "How do I know?" So this is sold at the medical shop for 40 rupees. The company gives for 40 rupees. And do you know what is the MRP, maximum retail price? That is what it is sold for at the customer's level. Any guess?
250.
250. I think you make a very good idea. It is not so much. I think India has to go to that level. That's what India is trying to do now. They sell for 125 rupees. So what is 40 rupees? What is given for 40 to the medical shop is sold for 125 rupees. Then I turned this side because I did some financial management. That's my background originally. I said, what would be the distributor cost, wholesaler cost, stockist cost? then what is the cost of production? When I go backward like that, ultimately the company must be willing to give her 10 rupees and everybody will have 10 rupees at each stage, and finally it goes to 40, he sells for 125. When companies give it for 10 rupees, what is the cost of production? It may be 5 rupees. And what is the materials? It may be 1 rupee or half a rupee. So what is worth 5 rupees if it is sold for 125 rupees, where my brother-in-law enjoys a lot of profit? He bought a very good house with marble flooring, bought a car, my sister is happy. But then my question was, at what cost? Is it this that I want to accept in our Indian society? So this is where we look at any development should also have justice with that. If I am blind to that, then I am least bothered. Because yes, he is buying for 125 rupees. When you go to the medical shop, he will say, hello, how are you? He will talk some good things and say, why are you looking lean these days? But suddenly you get a doubt, what happened to me?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know whether it's aside or not. But take the case of cows. Now farmers in India are committing suicide because they don't have money to feed themselves or their families. Now, how do you convince a farmer to buy 5 animals and take care of them? So basically, it becomes a vicious cycle. And how do you break into that? Because the dependence has been it is so intertwined that you cannot bring this model suddenly. You have to bring it in all phases of life. You cannot just install one biogas plant and assume that everything will go back to normal.
I think the problem is not here. In fact, the problem started much earlier. When the farmer enjoyed that freedom, when farmer enjoyed that Swaraj, he enjoyed his agriculture and he was producing for himself and not for the market. And we tempted him. And we asked him to produce for the market. And then he doesn't have any, in fact, he goes for more cotton, chilies, tobacco kind of crops where there is no fodder available for the animals. Then what will he do? He will have to sell them. So whatever independence he had, because he was tempted with money. Because he is now looking everything in terms of money.
So if he doesn't produce for the markets, how do people in cities get the food? I mean, there has to be this trade happening, right? You're talking about people living in isolation. The whole idea is about people in cities giving bread.
I would like to, with my folded hands and with all my humility, I say, let me first bother about myself, my production, my life, to feed city people. Should I commit suicide? Should it be a situation like that I should be forced into? I think let us also be very honest in expecting the farmer to get into a situation like that, still feeding the urban community.
But how can you be so sure that he wouldn't have committed suicide had he remained isolated for so long? I mean, it's possible that the pattern of suicide or whatever is just something which couldn't have been stopped even had they remained in isolation, right? I mean,
No, but at that time there was no suicides
It was
so it
self-reliant.
could be something else. It could be a third factor. Say the weather pattern has changed. There's not enough rain.
I would say, again to Shashank I look to now, that can this be a topic to study? Whether the shift in the patterns in agriculture resulted in the suicide phenomenon of the farmers? I believe in it because I had been working, looking at what is happening and all that. But if you say some empirical, methodical research, I think something like that can be, at least for academic interest, if not anything else. Let us go, in fact I would like to go by your argument because I am also an urbanite. I have also come from the urban areas. I feel sad about it for being an urbanite like. I don't know how to express my feelings. So, this is something.
You living in the urban area, what would you do if the villagers don't send you the food? I mean, what will you do?
Therefore, I want my food, my existence. Therefore, I don't care about the urban, rural person, whatever happens to him. Ultimately, we are extending that argument. That's what exactly I am
So
saying.
it's about give and take, right? You're giving something.
What am I giving to him?
On that note, let's argue. We need food in our stomach to have a vigorous argument. So let us break for 5 minutes. Let's grab our plates and come back here and we'll continue the discussion.
What am I giving? I am giving him soft drink. I am giving him cigarettes. I am giving him this, cosmetics and things which are really not required for him.
I'm not forcing it down his throat.
Yeah, that's
No,
exactly
but
that's
you
what
are
I wanted to
I
say
think that
earlier.
discussion we should definitely have. Let's have
Let
some
me
food.
complete this point to him. In fact, I am very, very happy you said it. That's what I want to tell you. That is the greatest tragedy because you make him buy all these things. That's why I use the word willing cooperation of the exploited. Earlier it was not that. See, I wanted to exploit or I wanted to grab something. That's what I started with. And you beat somebody and snatch away the golden chain or a watch or property. But now he is coming to you and he is giving his wealth to you. I think this is much worse than that. At least I have a respect for a thief.